Hello and welcome to Inflection Point Conversations. I'm Michelle Abeda, an art director and 3D artist. In this podcast series, I'll be interviewing experts in the fields of art, architecture, and visualization. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the disruptive topics that have reached an inflection point in our industry. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe. You can also comment and give feedback. I'd love to reach more people and grow this incredible community. Okay, today I'm talking with Steven Ren. Steven is the founder and CEO of Palatial, a platform that simplifies the translation of 3D scenes into real-time experiences. While studying architecture and computer graphics at Cornell University, he developed a curiosity with how we perceive immersive technologies and how they can be used to blur the distinction between physical and digital spaces. Steven developed these ideas further when he worked at Tesla, where he introduced a real-time workflow for BIM visualization, and later at Volley Studio, where he led the XR team to develop immersive experiences. He founded Palatial about 2 years ago as a way to make it easier for artists to create these immersive experiences so they can focus on telling their compelling stories. Welcome, Steven.
Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join your podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So we've met at a couple of different events, and you spoke at 3DNY and introduced Palatial, and it's super interesting. I'm really excited to ask you lots of questions because I feel like this is, again, such a hot topic at the moment in our industry with real-time workflows. And I'm always fascinated when people say, like, here's a way to do it easier. And I'm like, let's go. I'd love a way to do it easier because I've spent a long time trying to, having like, making real-time immersive experiences the long way around.
Yeah, I think that's like, I feel like there's a lot of change going on in the past few years with how the 3D workflow in general is being done, like from everything being manual and like you clicking buttons, dragging models between three different softwares to get things done, to now like all of a sudden there's tools that make it almost one click,
Yeah.
or like allow you to do a lot of the more manual steps automatically. And I think
Yeah.
that's where my interests lie, where Palatial is designed to be sort of this co-pilot for 3D artists and designers to allow them to, stay in the creative flow of building 3D environments without having to deal with uh, optimization, performance targets, or like repairing geometry,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's great because I feel like, on one hand, for an artist, they're super interested if someone says, you can do this difficult bit easier so you can focus on the creative stuff. And at the same time, as someone who doesn't understand the coding side, so I'm always curious, be like, but what? But what is it actually doing? So I like that's why it's kind of fascinating. And I suppose you have both of those angles where you're an artist as well as the computer, the software developer. So, you have a good understanding of it, and maybe you can be great for you to explain to people who maybe don't understand so much kind of what's happening. Yeah, I'd love to let's start asking you some questions. So I want to take it back for you went from studying architecture and computer graphics at Cornell,
Mhm.
and then you went into real-time and VR technology. Did that feel like a natural transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my interest in architecture really is in like sort of the experiential part, like how you can create new places that didn't or couldn't exist before. And then I wanted to have a part in building those spaces. But when I was in school, I realized that like the most interesting part to me was actually designing or crafting that sort of experience and journey through a space.
Mm.
And a lot of that is a similar process when you're designing for digital environments for VR or XR, where architecture is a way of imposing order over reality, but VR is doing the same thing at a different part of the perception stack. So
Yeah.
if instead of it being in the physical space, you're intercepting the signals going to your eyes and then presenting a sort of digital version of that. So when I was in architecture school, I was invited to be part of this experimental sort of VR studio that was hosted in joint as like a joint project between the CS department, like HCI and architecture,
Hmm.
to sort of study the principles of presence in VR and
Mm.
how that can be used to impact, like to influence design and like the built environment. So
Can you describe what presence, like what that term means in terms of VR?
yeah, presence is sort of the sensation of being physically in a space.
Hmm.
So it's like just a bunch of tricks to confuse your brain and make it think that what you're seeing on a screen is actually a physical space that you're standing inside. And
Hmm.
I think um, when I went in, I thought that mostly this is to do with technology and like the displays, like what is the VR headset like displaying to your eyes? What is the frame rate? And that is part of it, but another like significant part of it is actually what is inside the experience, like the sort of um, visual cues that you provide within a digital experience
Yeah.
that cue the brain into thinking that this is a realistic space. So that could be like relative size compared to familiar objects, or the density of textures on a wall, or even just like the atmospheric fog to convey that something is very distant.
Yeah.
And I was just struck by how much design actually impacted the feeling of presence in a space. So I thought, like,
Yeah.
that's an area where a design mindset can really add a lot of value.
Yeah. Absolutely. And did you sort of try out and experience a bunch of different, VR experiences to sort of come to this conclusion? Like, were you testing out different things and you found some things were more realistic than others?
Yeah, so we did like this whole like quantitative and qualitative study into like trying to do it like scientifically, measuring what like how accurate your perception of scale was based on isolating certain factors, like each of these factors individually, and
Hmm.
seeing which ones impacted your sense of scale more. And yeah, obviously like the sort of FOV, frame rate, and display density, all those are like foundational. But once you get into like a more once you have a display that can actually render these objects, then you like I think there's certain fall offs where
Hmm.
when you're really close, it's about like binocular vision. When you get to like between the arm length and like a few meters away, then it becomes sort of like uh, when you move, is there a parallax? How many familiar cues do you see in the space? And we
Hmm.
measured all of those, and we discovered that like that there is more impact from these design cues in the space than the studies would suggest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's really more about like the design of the experience in terms of the 3D, like what do we put where? Let's put these things out here, right? Like I remember one of the first VR experiences that I made in a studio a few years ago, um, was really interesting because we found that we made this top floor penthouse kind of office for the executive. And when you were in the VR headset, we had a full size window. You could go out and look down and um, sort of New York from outside. And every time someone did that, they'd feel like vertigo. And I felt really good when that happened because I felt, yes, you feel like you're there because you're just standing, obviously.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. Like it's always the best when you feel like a visceral emotion from the experience, and I think that's the goal of presence, is to like fully convince you that you are in that space, so that what you're seeing is actually sort of subconsciously registering with the brain.
yeah.
Um, I think like I had a similar experience where like just seeing your own reflection
Mm.
in the space, even if it's like not your like a realistic portrayal of what your physical person is, just
Mhm.
having your hands affect the reflections around the scene. I think that adds a lot to it, because it's not just like a scene that you're like a spectator on. You're actually impacting what is in the scene.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen my reflection in a VR experience before. I've
I
always
mean, it's
been a
it's
bit
very
creepy.
difficult.
It's always been that creepy, like no reflection, like I'm a ghost.
Yeah.
Have you always been interested in workflow and process?
um I wouldn't say like I'm interested in the like process and workflow in and of itself.
Okay.
It's more of like a means to an end for me,
Mm.
where like I think when you build digital environments, there's like you have an idea of what you want to build in your mind, but then to actually get that out onto pixels, onto the scene, it takes a lot of effort.
Mm.
And a lot of it ends up being like doing the same thing over and over again.
Mm.
So I think automation in workflow and process is sort of a required, like a necessary evil to
Yeah.
get you to a place where you can then start to like be creative and actually like uh, put your ideas down on into the scene and then see what's working and not working, be able to iterate on it really quickly, and then go from there. So
Yeah.
like an example would be like, so when I was doing this sort of like internship at Tesla, they were trying to get us to visualize, like I was trying to convince them to visualize the gigafactory in real time. And this is like a huge building that's like
Mm.
many hundreds of like thousands of square meters. And there was just so much data in this BIM model that we were trying to visualize. And it was a very big commitment to import each of these sections in,
Right.
and you couldn't
Mm.
tell what it was going to look like until you've finished processing it after like a day or two.
Mm.
So then you had to build automations to make sure that this process happens quickly and automated in the background, so that when you come back, you can then spend your time making decisions about what to do next, as opposed to just being the
Getting it in.
manual
Yeah.
cog in the machine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that some people, I think it's great, like, some people that I've worked with before, um, their first instinct is, okay, I could do this faster. We could be doing this faster. How do I do that? And, those people really like always help to sort of like make processes more efficient, which is great for everyone else, because not everyone else can necessarily see that. Sometimes you get in your own way and you'll spend the day doing the manual thing without figuring out how to make it faster. But when someone goes, wait, I can do this faster, or we could be doing this faster, it's like, great.
Yeah, I mean,
um,
and it is fun to like just mess around and like do it manually the first few times, but then like when you start doing it the like third, fourth time, that's when it's like, okay,
yeah.
I shouldn't be doing this anymore.
Yeah, this is a waste of my time.
Yeah.
When did you get interested in Unreal Engine specifically? And like, what is it about Unreal Engine that you got into?
I think when I was doing that like VR studio, that's like when I learned the bulk of the engine, because that's what we were using to do all of our tests. We were importing everything into Unreal and porting that to the VR headset and testing it, doing running experiments through Unreal. And I mean, I really appreciate the way Unreal is set up, because it allows you to get really high quality visuals straight off the bat.
Hmm.
Whereas like, compared to something like Unity, where like it's like default, everything in Unity is default off, and you have to
Yes.
go and enable everything to make it look good. Whereas Unreal, everything is default on, which means you need a beefy computer to run it. But then also when you put things in, there's less friction to get it to a point where it's believable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also I think their whole like approach of like not open source but like source available
Mm.
encourages experimentation on the platform. So you have other vendors like well, it used to be Oculus,
Hmm.
and now Meta, making their own branches of the engine, introducing their own features, so that like you can, if you wanted to, you could play around with the latest technology with the basis of a game engine already intact.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's made it a lot it's made it a lot easier. Like also from the artistic side, from like, Substance and Mega Scans and all of these other kind of companies who have built in-game tools, like it's just nice and that everything's sort of combined in one platform.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that like I don't know, Tim Sweeney and like Epic Games, they've always been really fair about like pricing and like supporting their community, and it's just not always the case. You don't really
Yeah.
get that sense for from every company.
Mm.
Um, and I think their end goal is kind of similar to where I think things are going, where like they think that Unreal is sort of the basis of this simulation engine of reality.
Mm.
And they're working really hard to get it to a place where you can use it for that. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You founded Palatial almost 2 years ago, and you're the CEO. Can you describe a bit what Palatial is and what you do?
Yeah. So Palatial is a co-pilot for 3D artists and designers to accelerate and simplify like the whole process of creating real-time experiences. So like building a VR experience, creating something on the web, loading something onto the phone. Right now, it's very tedious and manual, and like you have to either know the engine really well to be able to do it, and also spend weeks making each experience. Um, but I think our goal is to make it so that it's more like uh, Squarespace, where anybody who wants to build a website can go to Squarespace and build a website from like a template, customize it, add their own content, and then not have to worry about the technical details behind setting that up.
Yeah.
Like we want to do the same thing for building 3D environments and 3D space experiences.
Mhm.
Um, so it's Palatial right now is a bunch of automations and like a web dashboard that allows you to go through that process,
Mhm.
um, and like basically take any 3D model, upload it to our web dashboard, have us automatically process and optimize it, and repair any geometry for a real-time setting, and then you get back a scene that is like ready to go in Unreal, or ready to share as a link if you
Mm.
want to just like show your space to someone else that doesn't have like a big computer.
Yeah.
Once you get your scene in Unreal, there's still a lot of work to do. Like you don't necessarily model all the details in your 3D modeling tool. Like there's a lot of dressing and vegetation that needs to happen in a real-time setting. Right now, we support artists within Unreal, by allowing them to, bring their scene in, put vegetation, add their interactions, customize their scene, and then use Palatial again to optimize whatever they did,
Mm.
and then output to a stream
Yeah.
or output to a VR experience. So it's like
Right.
a
So the
whole
idea is
workflow.
that you
Yeah.
take from 3D into Unreal, and then they upload it for you to optimize, and then it comes back, and then they can do the set dressing, and then send it again to optimization.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not really like a one click thing, but like the each step is one click.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I understand. And like how many people work for you?
We
What do you
have
work with?
8 full-time employees right now. Um, they come from like a lot of different backgrounds because we're trying to build a tool that's not just for architectural visualization, even though that's where we're starting.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have our CTO is from films and VFX. We
Right.
have people from gaming, from like with a background in AI or computational geometry, so that like we have a pretty well represented team from all the different 3D industries so that we can build a tool that is useful for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like I haven't heard of many um like other companies doing the same thing, so I think it's like such a great idea. What made you want to start your own company? Did you always want to start your own company?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, my parents were entrepreneurs, so like
Yeah.
growing up, I always like they always taught me like things about like starting your own company. So I guess subconsciously that was always on my mind. Um, but I think what really made me like take that leap was because I thought that like, a lot of software that we use as designers is designed for by people who are from software.
Mm.
They sort of think in a slightly different way, and they like a lot of times, especially in sort of the 3D workflow, like I felt like we were like you have to fight the tools to do something that you want, and I felt like there just wasn't enough representation of like designers leading these kinds of types of companies. So I thought, like I wanted to add my voice as someone who values design and
Mm.
values the artistic side of these kinds of experiences, to like put my voice out there and like be able to be a force that like is fighting for the ease of use for people who are creatively minded.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And so I wanted to ask you about like the one-click solution. And I know a lot of people are skeptical. Full disclosure, me too. I've always been skeptical when people say like just 2 clicks and you can get this in, because every time I've like experienced that, there's always been something that's been done in the background or behind the scenes, like in my experience, when you've had software, it says, kind of 1 click and you can get this in, and then you try that on your, very heavy scene, for example, with assets from all over the place. You don't realize that they mean you have to optimize it first to be able to do the 1 click thing, because a scene is not just a scene.
Yeah.
I've experienced that. But so with that in mind, what would you say to artists who are skeptical about the 1 click solution thing? Like, and I know you said it's not just 1 click, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
how do you?
I am skeptical as well. Like it definitely is not 1 click right now.
Mhm.
Like, and I would say that our goal is to get it to the point where it is 1 click, but you always want to have the artistic vision, the artist be in control of the output and have the ability to change it afterwards if they're not happy with something. And I
Mhm.
think that's the part that's missing in a lot of like generative or just 1 click solutions, where
Mhm.
the engineer has thought, okay, we have this like this geometry, like we think that everyone's going to work like this, and then they click a button and then they move on. But
Mm.
really it's about like this whole back and forth process, like the co-pilot workflow, where you send something, you get it back, like you get a really easy way to preview the results back, and then
Mhm.
you continue to iterate until you're happy.
Mm.
And I think that is sort of the key to making sure that someone is happy with the results.
Yeah.
um, and I think a lot of times with like our approach to 1 click is that like we make, like, coming from an architecture background, we've seen a lot of the craziness that's out there, and we're not saying that this is going to work for every case, but we are like, we always test with like the craziest models that we can find to make sure
Yeah.
that like when you say something is going to work, it actually works across every single possible scene.
Yeah.
Uh, it's as opposed to just like whatever you can find off of like a 3D library that is like a template file.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
which is great. And I feel like you're also coming from the point of view of the designer and artist. I think that often when we hear the 1 click solution, which I understand is like a goal, like you want to make it as much as close to 1 click as possible. You
mhm.
often hear it from people who are the marketing team of a software or something, and then you feel like you want to get more specific. So I think it's great that like coming from you and your background and your experience, like you're saying it from someone who has been doing this, so it's not like a brush over in a way.
Yeah, I mean, like I think the tendency with artists is when they're building something, they like to push the software, whatever software they're using, to the absolute limit to achieve the highest quality output
Mm.
possible. And I think that's when you start to see like the frayed edges of whatever like software you're using, like where it's just is not designed for something, but you're technically allowed to do it, but then it's not designed to handle uh,
Yeah.
that extreme case. Um, so like with us, like I think most of our time was actually spent like figuring out those that like maybe 10% edge case where someone has put a million trees or
Yeah.
maybe not a million trees, a million leaves or a million blades of grass into the scene, and they're all like individually modeled. Like what happens when you try to bring in into a real-time engine, like they're like at the limits of these cases, like there's just so much more that you have to consider, um like having to instance it, replace duplicate geometry, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And is this also where, that research that you were talking about that you did at Cornell comes into play, where, for example, someone might put like a million leaves on the tree, but maybe that like you don't need all those leaves on the tree to make it to make it feel realistic, you can actually like cut down on that and
Mhm.
do another thing that's more optimized, maybe like blur the trees in the background, for example, and
Yeah.
that might like make it, just as immersive, if not more, and optimized and runs faster. Like, do you bring in those kind of principles?
Yeah, I think that definitely like uh helps us decide like what features to prioritize, and um like, and it's also like part of what the AI is doing in the background to like, because you when you go in as an artist and I'll try to optimize a scene, you kind of have like, as a person doing this, you understand like that people will be experiencing space, they'll be occupying this certain portion of it, therefore you're not going to be able to, you're not going to care what something in the background in the corner somewhere looks like, because no one's going to ever go there.
Mm-hmm.
But the difficult part is um, automating that process and automating that understanding of 3D scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So to the point where a machine can also deliver the same results and be able to prioritize what is important in the scene and maintain the visual quality of that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I think definitely that those principles ring true, and like, we're just trying to figure out what is the best way to do that across
Yeah.
all cases.
So are you using AI tools within Palatial? Is that how it's set up and built?
Yeah, so I think AI is part of it. It's not like you just click AI and then it
Yeah,
works.
yeah, yeah.
It's
The AI.
yeah, it's we use AI to understand the 3D scene. That's the main use case of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone uploads a model, we go through and sort of um, label it with sort of what we think the objects are,
Mm-hmm.
and then we use those labels, which the labels are generated from both text data and image data from the scene. So we look at like what things are named, what texture maps are named, but we also like look at where the object is in context of the rest of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a rectangle, that could be a column or a whole building, depending on what the context around it is. So it's
Mm-hmm.
important to consider both the text and the visual data. Once you have that sort of labeled scene, then we can say like, based on what is in the scene, based on how it's performing, then we can decide what optimizations to make
Mm-hmm.
and like what areas we need to prioritize in terms of quality.
Yeah. So forgive me, this is a stupid question, but do you have actual people working on those scenes? So you're using the AI tools to sort of, to help with the optimization, but do you have actual people like who work at Palatial who are looking at specific scenes and making these decisions? Is
No.
it like, so all of this is done automatically?
Yeah, I think that's the hard part. Like, because um, I've seen a
Because you
lot of
need like a
platforms.
whole workshop of people to go through all the scenes if you had them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you basically have some office somewhere where it's just like a bunch of people like looking at models all day, which is I think that's an approach that works fine if you have maybe 10 models or 100 models going through a day, but like when you start scaling, that really breaks down.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, from the start we had to make sure that every single step of this is fully automated,
Hmm.
and um, like we just launched, so I think right now we have this sort of review process where like it goes through the fully automated pipeline, but then we like have someone make sure that this is actually like there's no errors and
Right.
before we send it out. But I think pretty soon we'll be able to get rid of that step, and then it'll be just fully automated, so that like if someone sends a model at 4 a.m., they don't have to wait for
Yes,
people to
for a
wake up.
human. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how is your business model in terms of is it like a subscription service, or is it like a use case, pay by use?
Yeah, it's like consumption based. So um, based on the size of the file that you upload, we would sort of we don't really it's actually free to run the optimizations
Hmm.
for anybody. You can just keep uploading models, but what's not free is the ability to preview it on a web stream
Hmm.
or to download the results.
Right.
So we've structured it in this way because I think it would be really frustrating if someone uploaded their models and paid a bunch of money and then didn't get results that they were happy with.
I see. Yeah.
So I think you would only pay if you were happy with the results and wanted to download it, continue working with it, or continue to stream it, and share with stakeholders or clients.
Yeah. And another question, what do you think um about clients who maybe have strong NDAs on like privacy issues with their projects? Is it like a closed system, or is their work, once it's uploaded, is it available for other people to see?
No, it's absolutely not available for anybody to see. We've designed everything to like comply with like all data privacy laws that we can find.
Yeah.
So it's like very closed off. Like we don't like the files get transferred to our servers, which are like really locked down with like GDPR compliant like data security, and
Yeah.
then we process it and then send it back to them. And everything they upload is kept inside their workspace, which is like their own like walled off garden of storage on the cloud.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty secure, and
Yeah.
there's the ability to like password protect uh, like every stream that you send out.
Yeah. Great. And so who are you targeting as your client? Like you said that you've recently just launched, and so are you at the moment you focused on architectural visualization? Are you approaching ArchViz studios and architecture companies?
Yeah, so our first sort of initial market is architecture firms and ArchViz uh, studios, I would say. And we've like I think we have like a good representation from most of the large architecture firms in New York and who have signed up to our wait list and are waiting for us to roll it out to them. And
Nice.
I'm sorry if anyone's listening, if we've taken a long time to roll it out. I think we want to make sure that it's working for all these edge cases that I was talking about before
Mm,
we sort of send it out. But yeah, so I think that's the first wave of um, making sure that people who are actually already working in Unreal, who
mm,
have workflows from 3ds Max, Rhino, or Revit into Unreal Engine,
mhm,
can take advantage of the optimization tools and the stream sharing tools to accelerate their existing workflows.
mhm.
Um, so that's like, going to visualization directors and, um, helping them accelerate the workflows and make sure that, because a lot of times we found that there's a very small visualization department within architecture firms
Yep.
that has to handle a lot of projects, and there's more demand for their work than they have time to get to.
Mhm.
So using a tool like Palatial, you can sort of automate a lot of the sort of busy work and allow them to focus their efforts on like sort of the bespoke elements of each project to get through a much larger quantity of projects
Yeah.
with the same team. And then the next step is sort of to bring it to more like designers in general, where it's not so much about working inside Unreal and accelerating an existing workflow. It's about creating new workflows where someone can upload their model and get a stream that can be shared without having to go into Unreal Engine to edit it beforehand. And I
Yeah.
think that's like where we're heading, but it's not exactly perfect right now. So I think we want to focus on the first case first to make
Yeah.
sure that all the edge cases are smoothed out.
Yeah. Um, I have one closing question for you, which I think would be a nice one to end it on. Do you have any advice for someone who wants to start creating worlds in real time?
Yeah, I think the best way to learn something is to just dive in and start building. That's how I learned the best, because when you like take a course and you like are watching tutorials, it's hard to understand what what is being taught if it's not put in context of something that you're looking to do
Mm.
and applied right away. So I would always recommend building something, even if it's like not going to be perfect and like is very crappy the first time around. Um, Finding like mentors and reaching out to people who are like experts in their field and just not being afraid to ask the stupid questions is
Yeah.
also important, because I think I've spent like probably weeks on trying to figure out an issue that where someone else looked at it and in 2 seconds they were able to tell me what was wrong. And I
Yes.
think that's like it's just about reaching out. And I think a lot of times as a beginner, it feels intimidating to ask these questions.
Mhm.
And then I think the last one is um, I also would encourage using AI, like things like OpenAI or Anthropic's like Claude to interpret, like to help you understand your code or understand what is happening in the engine. Because I think they've gotten to a point where it's not as like inaccurate as it used to be, where it's
Mm.
actually becoming useful for if you're writing a piece of blueprint code, you can just send a screenshot to it and ask it what is wrong, and it'll
Right.
actually give you some useful answers. So I think using these kinds of tools that are out there to basically have your own tutor
Yeah.
is going to help people learn a lot faster.
That's great advice. Yeah, I actually didn't really think about that. I was thinking that you were talking to developers, but actually for artists who are using blueprints, that's also great advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, I just started playing around with some of these tools because I when they first came out, I tried it and it was pretty bad. But yeah, I think it's gotten much better.
Yeah. That's great. Well, congratulations on, starting the company and launching it recently. I think it sounds really exciting, and I'm excited for other people to start using it and for it to grow. So I hope that you can get your name out there, and I'll put the name of um, the website, but can you just tell me the website for anyone who's just listening?
Yeah, it's palatialxr.com, and you have a rolling alpha sign up list. So if you want to try it out, I would encourage you to just put your name down, your email down, and then we will reach out.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and discussing all these things. And I feel like just in a short time you did some myth busting there, so which is great, and explaining things to, in layman's terms, which is always very helpful. And yeah, it's a very exciting product.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.